Okay, it is 4:30 on March 4th. I'm calling to order the Middleton School Committee meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is recorded. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I don't believe anybody has signed up for remarks for the public, so we'll move on to approving the meeting minutes from the meeting on February 5th and February 10th.
See them in my drive.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from February 5th?
Make the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, moving on to February 10th, which was our Saturday budget meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from February 10th?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes. February 10th.
I'll second the motion.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
The Fuller Meadow asked not in the budget, but the other part was the SEL teacher, but I'm just skinny, is that included in here? That was the other part that we talked about.
It's mentioned in, it says, J. Roberts noted Fuller Meadow, that paragraph.
Okay,
It talks about adding the increase for
okay,
the.
yes, got it, okay, yep.
Yeah, like in the middle of that
Yep,
paragraph.
got it.
Yeah. Okay,
then I
all
have
in
no
favor
questions.
of approving the minutes from February 10th, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay. Moving on. So reports from other committees. Jackie, I'm going to hand it over to you to give us an update on CPAC.
Yes. For CPAC currently, what we want to be able to share is that we have several workshops coming up. And the first one is actually this Thursday, the 7th, I believe it is Alan Bloom is going to be doing a virtual meeting. reviewing the new IEP document for any parents in the district who are interested in joining. And that new IEP document, the district is being trained on this year and will roll out in the fall. And there are some differences in the forms. That is, this week we will have our regular business meeting on the 13th. Will be 6:30. We're actually holding that virtually just because there are so many meetings this month that instead of meeting in person. And so we'll share out on Facebook the link for that meeting for families who are interested in joining. And then just nailed down a date today for the 21st, I believe is also going to be virtual. And Lynn Bennett at Masco is bringing in consultants to what they call their LRC, or their Learning Resource Center. And she is bringing on consultants, but is providing an opportunity for parents of students, either currently or potentially incoming families, to meet with the consultants to discuss either their concerns or hopes for the program. And that will be the 21st, and that will also be virtual, and people can find information about that on our Facebook page as well. And we have other workshops coming up in April, which I'll touch on next month. Currently, we are working to advocate and share information on a few different budget topics. So if anybody has questions in particular, the Masco SEL, Masco counselors that are in the budget. But as far as the elementary budget goes, then topics such as like the new reading curriculum and how the CPAC would support the need for that, and the work that we've done with the literacy subcommittee is something we're happy to provide information on, and also will likely be sharing out information on as well. Okay. And I'll share more information next month on other up and coming, and then how these current events were attended.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, moving on to reports from the superintendent.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. Good afternoon, I should say, everyone. Good to see you all. A couple of just quick updates. We have a little bit of a hard stop tonight at 6:15. I appreciate the school committee's willingness to change the time today. It's actually bookended quite interestingly in that we had to ask Middleton School Committee to move the time so we get to a Topsfield FinCom meeting. And on Thursday, we had to ask Topsfield to move their school committee so we can get to a Middleton FinCom meeting. So we appreciate everybody's endeavors as we navigate the budget process across the three towns. So we're probably around a 6:15 or so. They have us on at 6:30 over in Topsfield. So Steve and I will have to skedaddle over to, I think, Town Hall or Proctor or the library, wherever that meeting may be. Also, just a quick reminder, no school tomorrow in Middleton. It's Super Tuesday with the voting, and that's something we have talked about in the past. So there's no school for staff and kids tomorrow. You saw them probably setting up in the cafeteria when everybody walked in earlier today. And then MSBA SOI. Again, we appreciate the partnership with the town on this. In the drive, you'll find a folder that reads MSBA SOI. And we submitted this. This, as you recall, is that last section of roof that we need to complete here at Fuller Meadow Elementary School. It did not meet the age requirement back in the day when we did the roof, and so this section now meets the age requirement. The SOI process is now opened again. So there were two documents that Michelle and myself and Justin had to sign. I was laughing at Justin's signature. Apparently he communicates in dots. I'm going to have to mention that to him when I see him. The program was awful.
It was awful.
I would agree.
Like, it took me like 5 tries
I
to
teased
get
him earlier.
anything other than a dot in.
I would agree. But he has some nice dots on his signature page.
Oh, I see it.
Yes.
How did you get yours like that?
I had to work very slowly. So one was we had to certify that we're not closing any schools, which is kind of an odd thing to have to certify, but apparently across the state that might be the case, run maybe enrollments down or something. So there's one of those that we certified we're not closing schools, and then the longer one is the actual SOI. This is Steve Greenberg and Steve Clifford. I appreciate their timely efforts on this. This is the long document which indicates what the need is and the type of roof and so on and so forth. So this all had to get completed, and then we had to upload statements from the school committee. As you recall, the school committee voted to support the SOI. The select board voted to support the SOI. All of that had to get uploaded to the MSBA website, and off we go. This doesn't guarantee anything. It just guarantees that we're in the dance. It doesn't mean we'll actually be dancing. So we'll see how that unfolds in the months ahead, and we'll keep this committee tuned in as we make our way through that process. Regionalization Study Committee. That committee is continuing to meet and has continued to meet. They've taken presentations from all the different departments of the school district to kind of better understand these things. Michelle serves on that committee along with Costa and Roger Bourgeois, and Costa Prentakis. So they make up the Middleton contingent, and then we have a Boxford contingent, middle contingent, and administrators as well. My understanding is the next step, I had a chance, I was not able to get to the last meeting, but I watched it. My understanding is the next step is to do a presentation with Select Board, FinCom, School Committee.
Yes, so I have a date for you all, April 9th. It's a Tuesday. The Middleton reps from the Regionalization Committee will be doing a presentation to both the school committee and the Select Board at the Select Board meeting. And the purpose of this is to kind of uncover what we've done so far in this planning committee, answer any questions that both the Select Board and the school committee has. And then after that, we're hoping that community members will have watched that meeting and kind of get some of their own questions or concerns answered. Will then be reaching out to the community as a whole in kind of like an open forum setting. But we want to do the presentation first, just so to see if that can answer any questions or address concerns right off the bat. And then once we do meet with the community, they can make ask more educated questions, or maybe, uncover different concerns, something that we may not have thought of. It's just kind of a way of educating both committees and the public before we go out to the public as a whole. So hopefully you guys can all make it.
What time?
What time?
I think their meetings are usually 7.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's here?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, they're
Natasha.
usually here.
Yeah.
7?
Select board, yes, it's here.
Yeah.
So we would have to, just gonna make a note, because we would have to post that.
Yeah.
Right? So let me just make a note here, post MSC, what did we say, April 9th?
Yep.
April 9th, 7 o'clock here.
Yep.
Great. So that is that. And then the TTU School Committee, that meeting is next week. That will be on, Boxford, as you know, has the wheel this year, as we like to say. That rotates every year. So we follow the Boxford meeting. So this will be after the Boxford School Committee meeting. I emailed Carol today to ask if we could back up the Boxford School Committee meeting to 5, so we can have a TTU meeting at 7:15 as opposed to trying to do a TTU meeting at 9. She's navigating that through her committee, so at the moment, I would say you can plan for the TTU School Committee meeting to be March 14th at 7:15 in person. And the reason I say that, we were Zoom last time because Boxford was Zoom. It was just easier that way. But Boxford's in person this time, so the TTU meeting will be in person at the Cole Elementary School, 314 at 7:15. And once that agenda comes out, Colleen will be sure to swing that out to all parties involved. And then just going back to where I began, we have budget work to get through and policy work to get through. And with the hard stop today, if we don't get to all the policies, we'll just table them and push them to the next meeting. So we'll get through as much as we can. And then anything we don't get to, we'll just table to the next meeting. And that's the quick updates.
Okay, any questions before we move on? Okay, Steve, you're up.
All right. Good evening, everyone. For the sake of time, I'm going to be extra brief. Financial report is in the drive. Questions?
I did have one. Hold on. I'm looking at the, where did I see it?
Budget overview.
What's that?
The budget overview.
No, the uncommitted dollars. Is that kind of right around where you would normally see it at this point?
So when we look at uncommitted for the general fund, that's the one you focus on?
Yes.
At this stage, when I look at these things, and we say uncommitted, you know, there are still activities that need to take place. And, you know, they're not reflected yet because they're not encumbered yet.
Okay.
So this does not throw me, and you know, you see the applied income pieces, there's still a lot of activity that's gonna take place between now and when we close the books. So this is fine for what I see right now.
Okay,
You know, I don't have any issue with that.
okay,
Because we're not saying it's, we say, I use the term uncommitted, not, oh, it's surplus. We
right,
do
right,
not,
right, yeah,
we do not say that.
okay, all right, that's the only question I had.
Any other questions? Thank you. That is my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, moving right along.
That's me.
Yes.
I'll try to be brief as well, but not as brief as Mr. Greenberg. And unfortunately, my update is assessment heavy. Today, our fourth graders, some of our fourth graders participated in the NAEP assessment, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is also known as the Nation's Report Card. We were, as Howe Manning was, randomly selected, and then students in fourth grade were randomly selected to participate in either a reading test or a math test. Unfortunately, we see zero data from that. We see state level data and countrywide data, but we don't ever see local data. So we won't know how our kids did individually on it. Unfortunately, they will be back again on Wednesday. There were 39 students selected. They required 90% of those students, a 90% attendance rate. We missed that by one student today. We could have had 3 kids absent. We had 4, and 2 of those, it was their very first absence of the year. So hopefully at least two of them will be back on Wednesday, and we will be done with the NAEP. This is also officially MCAS season. Parents in the newsletter on Friday, the MCAS testing dates for each grade were in that. That will be in every Friday newsletter. I'll probably also send a separate email out with those dates as well. And it's pretty much each grade level tests 2 days each subject, so 2 days for reading, 2 days for math, and then 5th grade has an additional 2 days for science. So for the individual students, it's 4 or 6 days total. For me, it feels like every day from end of March through the end of May when we wrap up with the MCAS there. And then parent conferences, 21st and 22nd of March. Communication will be going out from teachers to schedule those shortly. That's it. Brief.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Quick bullets. I met with the Tri-Town Council, which was nice to meet those folks. I've never met them before. They'll be having Camp Invention, if you're familiar with it. It'll be at Fuller Meadow this summer, the last week in June. So we're working to prepare for that. Summer rec program, from what I hear, will be here also this summer. Jeff spoke about the half-days coming up, March 21st and 22nd for parent conferences. Same thing, teachers will be reaching out soon. Sarah O'Leary, Catherine Castangwe, and I have been working to set up Parent University, which will take place on April 27th from 8:30 to 11:30. We have a keynote speaker, Nadja Lopez, coming in, and the theme is building a healthy, supportive community for our youth. So we're excited about that, still working on it. And last thing is Read Across America. It's the month of March. Can't believe we're in March, but we are. Emily Fryer, ELA coordinator, is doing an amazing job. I think in her next life, she's going to be like an event planner. Because she just, all the bells and whistles come out. You know, she's great at it. So a lot of that information is going out to teachers, but it's also going out to parents. So it should be fun. Fridays, I think they're going to have some literacy spirit kinds of things, which, you know, parents all love when you got to dress your kids up in the morning. But so that information, if it hasn't already gone out, it should be coming out soon. So that is it.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, moving on. So gifts and grants. There is something in the gifts and grants folder.
Yeah, so very thoughtful. This was a gift that we are receiving from a teacher who is retiring this year, and typically in Middleton, the endeavor is usually to provide a retiring teacher with a chair with the Middleton town logo on it. And we usually put funds aside, when we know that there'll be teachers retiring, so we can purchase that chair from the town and then present it to a teacher at a retirement party. And the teacher has requested that we donate the funding for the chair back into her program. Jeff, I can't recall, is this public, this teacher's retirement?
If it's who I think you're thinking of, yes.
It's in the drive if you want to take a look.
Under which?
Under gifts and grants.
Gifts and grants.
I just want to make sure.
I
Not sure.
don't think so.
Yeah. So as you can see in there, it's just very thoughtful that this particular teacher wants to donate, take those funds instead of getting the chair and donate it back into programming here at Howe Manning Elementary School. And so we would just need permission from the committee to accept it, because this would be a gift, so to speak. It's basically taking the funds and putting it from the right pocket of the school to the left pocket of the school, so to speak, because it's funds that are already there to buy the chair, but instead of it going towards the chair, it would be going into reinvesting it into the program for future use. So a thoughtful endeavor for sure. And we would need the committee, if it's the will of the committee after reading through the documentation that I have there, to approve that.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor to approve the funds of the chair being reinvested back into school programming, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. If it's okay with the chair, have Peggy give an update. We've got two things. We want to talk a little bit about calendar, but before we get into calendar, as I had talked about and teased last time, the calendar is very similar to this year's calendar, but we have done some data collection and taken some feedback on report cards and conferences thus far. In the drive, there's a document that reads reporting process mid-year updates.
Okay.
Thank you
Yep.
very much. And Peggy is here.
So you wanted me to talk about the calendar, but you said two things. Was there something else?
I'm going to start with the reporting process mid-year update.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we had mentioned briefly at the last meeting that the October conferences were the big piece that changed this year related to the calendar. And that was very successful. We had positive feedback from both staff and from families. Just feeling like it was really nice to connect earlier in the year and to form that relationship, having families be able to get to know the teacher. They were able to share information about their children with the teachers earlier in the year to have that be sort of more impactful. I think parents appreciated getting a heads up earlier in the year about sort of how their children were doing, how they transitioned to school. So there really wasn't a downside to the October conferences, and so that's why when we were putting forth the new proposed calendar for next year, we were putting the October conferences in again, because that seems to have been very, very successful. In terms of the reporting process in general, we're kind of still in the thick of it. This is our first year all the way through. And, overall, it's been positive. There was a concern on the committee last year. So one of the things that we were trying to do with this reporting system was to separate the report cards from the conferences, because what was happening in the past is that you'd have a report card and then within a couple of weeks you'd have a conference. And a lot of times, it just ended up being a rehash of what was on the report card. It wasn't really new information. And so it felt very redundant to have those two things on top of each other. And we thought it would be better if we could separate them, because really what was happening is although there were like 3 report cards and 2 conferences, and so it seemed like there were 5 different things happening in terms of, or 5 different vehicles for information. They were happening just at 3 points in time. So what was being shared in the conference wasn't any different than what was being shared on the report card, because they were so close together. So we wanted to separate those so that we could get 4 distinct reporting points during the school year. So 2 are in writing, 2 are verbal, but because now we have October, January, March, and June, and those are 4 distinct parts of the year, parents are getting different information. And so that was something that we were thinking that would be better for communication, to be able to have that additional data point in there. And we're still collecting that data because we have the March conferences coming up. We'll be sending out yet another survey to families after that. But this will be the first time that families are getting that fourth data point, where in the past they've only really had the 3. So what we were worried about on the committee, though, is that the conferences often ended up being sort of an explanation of the report card. And we were worried that if we put this new report card out there without the conferences, that families might have a lot of questions, and that teachers would be getting a lot of calls or a lot of concerns from families wondering about that report card and how to interpret it. And we worked really, really hard to have the report card be very clear. So the language was simplified, we kind of pared it down, really tried to have the report card kind of speak for itself. We also enhanced the comments, so those were more expansive than they have been in the past, or at least more consistently expansive. I think in the past there were some teachers who perhaps wrote that much, but others didn't. And so it was providing kind of that equity in terms of what was happening across the district. But we were concerned that maybe there would be kind of a large number of families basically wanting a conference following the report card, because that's what they'd had in the past. And that really didn't come to pass. So when we surveyed families, the families that responded to that said that they felt like they had a pretty good idea of their students' strengths and weaknesses based on just the report card itself. The majority of teachers never heard from any families at all. And those who did, it was just a few families. So it wasn't this sort of large number of families that we concerned. We were just wondering what would happen without those two things being together. And we were hoping for this result, and we're very pleased to see that the report card did seem to speak for itself, and families on the whole didn't seem to have concerns, and because they would have reached out to us, I think, if they had those concerns. So far so good. I mean, we still have 2 more reporting, pieces to go through, with the March conferences coming up shortly, and then the June report cards. But so far, it seems to be working pretty well. And then in terms of just the calendar, which is your conversation tonight, really the only intersection between the calendar and the report cards is that October conference. And that was so well received that it certainly would be our recommendation that we repeat that again in this coming year's calendar.
I definitely agree that I like having the conferences in October. I thought that was helpful. From my experience as a parent, I felt that the report card itself was pretty easy to navigate and explain. To me, it just, even though it was halfway through the year, like it felt late to me. Did it feel that way with?
I felt the same with the conference. The conference is well placed. I think it's a good time of year. I just think there's a big gap between when the conference is and the report card came out, because there is, I think, like before the holiday break, or maybe like the first week in December, I think would be more timely, because if there is something to correct from that time to when the report card comes out, I think it gives it's like a better marker. I think there's a big gap between when we're doing that and the actual receiving of the report card. And I got some feedback from some parents as well.
Yeah.
Similar. They like the conference, though. I think that's effective.
And even if there is just 2 report cards that comes out, I'm just kind of like thinking ahead down the road. Say we get the report card on the very last day of school, that second report card.
Right.
I mean, for me, the end of school, and I think for a lot of people, is a really hectic time. And I may not even open that report card for like another week, just because my mind is, crazy with making sure the kids are taken care of and everything. So by the time like I open up the report card and look at it, and I have questions, be like, okay, summer's here, like, So, and I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but if there are 2 report cards, like, could we just kind of like shift them, like maybe like a couple weeks? Like, is that something that, I mean, I know that we're still gathering data and we want to wait until the end of the year and see how things turn out, but I'm just kind of trying to keep, ideas.
Yeah, I would say that's valuable feedback for sure. As Peggy and I meet and discuss this, this is our first in the cycle. Middleton's usually the first meeting, right? And then we'll have Topsfield, and then we'll have Boxford. So it'll be interesting as we navigate through all 3 towns where it lands. And the last point you made, Michelle, is spot on for sure. As Peggy said, we want to collect that data in March. We want to collect it again in June, and and go through that whole cycle of a year.
Yeah.
And then take input like this back, and then regroup in the summertime and have those broader conversations of like, okay, here's all the survey feedback. Here's the feedback we got from our committees along the way, and how does that inform things as we move forward, for sure.
Yeah.
Will there be another survey?
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the year?
Yeah, we'll have one in March, Dave, after the conferences, which are coming up, as Jen and Jeff had said, I think March 21 and 22.
Yep.
And then we'll do it again in June.
Perfect.
Yeah.
As far as the report card itself, though, I felt like it was easy to navigate and, you know, I understood everything.
Yeah, great. I think part of, so it remains to be seen, right? We haven't played out the whole way it goes this year. When we think about, one of the complaints we used to get from families was that the first reporting was really late. They heard nothing from us until December, right? So now they're hearing in October. Probably in fact, not probably, the longest kind of stretch in between reporting is between the October and January, but that's partly because the holidays are in there, which chops everything up. And also, we wanted to be able to capture universal screening data, which happens in January, as another data point to inform the report cards, right? So it was kind of that overlap of the data that we're collecting that helps to inform some of those report card ratings. Then there's the March, which will be like an opportunity to hear how kids are doing. And the focus of that conference will really be on sort of where are they on that continuum between like toward those end of year standards basically, and where do they still need to work on. So there really shouldn't be surprises in June, because that March conference should give a pretty good sense of like, since January, where are they, and do we think that they're on track or not to be meeting those standards by the end of the year. And we still have another 3 months to work on that and kind of get them there. So hopefully, I realize, I can see why it might have felt like a long time, because it was the first piece of paper, but it wasn't the first point of communication. And I think it'll be really important to see how the March conferences are received, because this will be the first time that what you're hearing in March is different from what you've heard on the report card, right? So we'll be interested to see, because when you think about, like, it feels like a long time. Before it was like roughly every 3 months, but you got a report at like 2 months. This was the longest stretch to 3, but we're going again 2 months, and then we go just under 3, right, to the last one. So it's a little bit more even and spread out. So I agree with Scott. I think what we're trying to get a feel for is, let's get through the whole cycle. Let's see how that feels, and see if families are feeling like they were kind of well informed along the way before making any specific suggestions for changes until we've experienced like the entire arc of what was intended. That's kind of where we're at right now.
So a survey went out in February for the
Yep.
report cards? So do we have that data or no?
That's, Peggy
That's what-
summarized it in here.
That's
But
what-
are we gonna see that or no?
We can share it for sure. Yeah. We did a
How many
summary,
res-
we did a one-page summary for everybody to make it a little bit easier.
How many responses did we get? Because I talked to a lot of people who said, I don't know what you're talking about, I never got a survey.
Yeah,
which
it was low.
It happens,
It was
yeah.
low. We sent it out multiple times. And, you know, we read that a couple of ways. You know, I think one way is people aren't shy, right? If they want to share a thought, and we appreciate that for sure. Whether it be at the school level or with the teacher or with Peggy or myself or whatever the
Sure.
case may be. And, you know, immediately after report cards, immediately after conferences, feedback was, I would say, low in terms of being a good thing, right?
Okay.
And then we did the survey, and we sent it out. I sent it out from like a district letter, and then we had all the schools send it out individually as well. And it was still low from folks. So we'll see in March
Yeah.
if it's the same sample size.
Okay.
You know, I think we were under 100.
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's not much.
yeah, it was part of your, like,
Winter update.
winter update, yeah.
And then the principal sent it out too, though, like a week later.
Was
So
it
hard
part
with
of like
email,
your
'cause-
Friday email? Like, yeah,
It went out as a link in the newsletter with
Yeah.
a blurb that said, you know,
yeah.
contact.
Yeah, I don't get the ones from Fuller Meadow, so, yeah.
I think if I'm remembering from it, Natasha, I think the biggest thing that came from it was like just this adjustment to the end of year benchmark.
Yes.
You know, that was probably the biggest piece of feedback, was like this adjustment to like, okay, we're now grading on an end of year benchmark. And that was an adjustment internally and externally.
Sure.
As opposed to a term benchmark, right?
Right.
I think that was the biggest
Yeah,
feedback.
that was the biggest piece that I think we need to navigate a little bit, is in terms of like, and this actually doesn't impact Middleton as much, because you've always graded against end of year benchmarks here. So that probably didn't feel different to families in Middleton, but it did feel different to the families in the other towns, and the teachers in the other towns. And I think the biggest difference is that when you grade on term benchmarks, it's possible to get a meeting expectations on everything mid-year, because you've set these artificial mid-year benchmarks. But then what was ended up happening is we set these artificial benchmarks mid-year, kids grow at different paces, And sometimes kids would then, like, we would say that they were meeting in January, or whenever the first report card came out, and then they would go down as the year went on, because it wasn't like the standards are end of year standards. They measure where you're supposed to be in June. They don't necessarily tell you like exactly where you might be at this point in time, and at this point in time, the goal is to get them there, and kids just kind of grow at different paces. So that was always very confusing to families, because the standards are intended to measure end of year outcomes, and they're written that way, frankly. And then we had this weird dynamic going on that kids were told that they were meeting, and then suddenly they weren't meeting. So we shifted everybody over to end of year. So that does kind of change how it feels. You don't see as many M's mid-year because a lot of those standards are still in progress. So that's just something we're kind of working through, I think, still in terms of communication. I did recently send out a communication to staff, just kind of based on their feedback, kind of what, some suggestions for thinking about the next go-around related to that, just because it is new to 2 of our towns to think about grading in that way. So we did do training in advance, but still, until you experience it for the first time, then you kind of have questions.
Can I ask kind of a general grading question? If Masco is on a letter grade system, why is elementary on a number? I've always wondered that.
So it's not a number system, it's a standards-based grading. So we happen to use a scale that might be letters or might be numbers, but really what we're measuring is performance on individual standards.
Okay.
What a high school or sometimes even a middle school report card does, it's an aggregate of everything. It doesn't actually tell you anything about how they do in a particular standard. So it's basically add up all their test scores, add up all their homework, their class participation, put it in a big stew, and pump out a grade. And I was a secondary person historically, so I can speak from the high school perspective that that's how grades are calculated. It literally is like, how many points did you get on this test, and you add it up. And so the problems with letter grading systems is they don't give you a lot of information about how kids are doing on specific concepts. So most elementary schools actually grade against standards, because it is saying very discreetly they have this skill, they don't have this skill. And like an A at a high school level might be telling you that they're a good student and overall are doing well, but it really doesn't tell you anything about individual skills. And it's really important at the elementary level for parents to understand that, because it's very developmental. And so that's why most elementaries do. It's a rare elementary that would have a grading scale. They almost always are on standards-based. It's just a difference between elementary and secondary.
And as public education continues to evolve, and we've talked about knowledge, skills, dispositions, and competencies for years in the Tri-Town, right? What are the knowledge, skills, dispositions, and competencies that we want our kids to have? That's going to be part and parcel. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see that more at a middle school and high school, because content is going to be so ubiquitous, right? In terms of, right now you can look up just about any single thing, right? What are the skills that we're making sure our kids have? What are the things that they can know and be able to do very discreetly, right? And giving us that understanding is just going to help the kids even further as they make their way through, upper elementary, middle school, high school. And so something we'll talk a little bit about at the Tri-Town committee on next Thursday, but just the conference I recently attended, just this focus on skill development and how important that's going to be as kids navigate. Again, you've heard me say it before, our kindergarten kids walk off the stage in 2036, right? Like, it's going to look very different then in terms of what the skills the kids will need in order to navigate their world. So this conversation connects to the broader calendar conversation.
Can I just
Of course.
add one more thing to
Yeah.
the report card conversation? So I agree, looking at the report card, I liked how it looked. I liked the information that was on there. I appreciate the clarifying the scale. I liked the student learner qualities part and how that was clarified. So potentially for the majority of our students, that could work very well and you would get a lot of positive feedback. For students who the report card means almost nothing, then to not have the detailed report of a progress report until January and then only twice a year felt very uncomfortable. And I talk with our team all the time, but you get so much detail in that progress report that we were actually, and again, it's a schedule thing, but we were going into her IEP meeting, but I hadn't even seen her progress report yet going into her IEP meeting. So I didn't have that data in hand to kind of know where we were at. And the conference it just by nature is more informal. We did talk some data points, but it didn't cover all. So with those students who that data and that detailed information is much more crucial, only having it twice a year almost feels scary. So I'm curious what, and I did share that in the feedback. I'm curious what other families similar to our situation would share.
Right. Thank you.
All valuable. We appreciate the feedback for sure. As I said, we'll go through this cycle of school committee meetings and assimilate that with the data that we collect along the way. And again, I think this idea of completing the whole cycle is an important one, and getting everybody through, June, and then seeing where we stand from there.
Thank you.
So calendar is connected to that, just in the sense of as we look towards next year's school calendar. I think certainly, as Peggy had talked about, the October conferences, like that was a slam dunk all the way around, no questions asked. This calendar is identical to this year, other than the movement of the holidays, right? The holidays have moved. It's a leap year this year. You all remember as kids, you probably did this, maybe you didn't, but you looked at the calendar and you waited for the winter holidays to fall on a Wednesday, because that might be 2 weeks of no school, right? That was like the big, I remember that as a kid. I'd be like, ooh, every 7 years we get 2 weeks off. And I went back and I looked what we did 7 years ago, and we're going to follow that same model. There's benefit to it and there's value to it of getting everybody back. So Christmas is on a Wednesday. New Year's is on a Wednesday because of the leap year, right, this year. And so we'll come back, we did last time around, come back the 2nd and the 3rd to kind of get everybody back in. That's a long stretch to be off for 2 weeks total. And so getting everybody back in the 2nd and 3rd, getting those routines reestablished, particularly at the elementary level with our youngest learners, and getting everybody sort of back into the modality of school, almost like the beginning of the school year, come back for a couple of days, and then a full week afterwards. So that's the only real big change, I would say, would be, as you look at the calendar and the drive, starting on the 26th and 27th of August, and then having our typical beginning. Middleton, a little different again until they get that complex built. We've got a no school day in there on Tuesday after Labor Day. It's the state primary, similar to today, tomorrow, where there's voting. We've tried to do voting in school at the same time, and that is not a successful endeavor. And so hopefully the sooner that complex gets built, we won't have to do that. But the 3rd is one little difference in the Middleton calendar.
September 3rd.
Yes, thank you. September 3rd. And then all of the remaining dates are identical, again, other than when the holidays land. Masco is also coming back on that January 2nd and 3rd. We wanted to make sure we were aligned on that. And then, so the first day of school would be for kids August 28th, and then barring weather and winter and all of the things that happen for the 24-25 school year, the final day would be the 16th for the 180 days. So that is the calendar that we're bringing to the 3 communities this cycle of school committee meetings. So the school committee has 2 choices. We can, if you want to look at it, study it some more, certainly. Ultimately, we need a vote from the school committee to get the calendar out to families. So typically, at the very least, we try to communicate to families what the first day of school is, so people can kind of build backwards from there. But the calendar's been in the drive for the committee to review prior to the meeting. As I said, there's no changes, there's no additional anything, PD or this or that. It's all pretty much take this year's calendar, move it forward, and then just account for the different holidays that are in there. So it would be up to the committee how they want to proceed, if they wanted to vote the calendar for the 24-25 school year, or if they wanted to vote the first day and spend a little bit more time looking at it. Leave that to the will of the committee.
Last year, during the May meeting, when it was voted on, we talked about possibly syncing up with Masco for the families that have kids at both. Was there any progress? Like, did you have talk to Mike Harvey?
We do where we can, Natasha, I would say, like that 2nd and 3rd, making sure we're all coming back on that day.
Yeah.
They still do those, I don't want to call them half-day Wednesdays, they still do like
Yeah, the
1:15
one- yeah.
Wednesdays, and that doesn't align great with us as an elementary school. You know, if you talk to teachers, a Wednesday half-day is always a trick, because it's like, okay, let's have Monday again on Thursday, after you have a half-day on Wednesday. So that's why years ago, we kind of pushed them to Friday, because it's end of the week, and it logically for the younger kids, it seems to make more sense. So I would say where we can, we have, but it doesn't line up perfect.
Can I ask, so this reflects the current report card conference schedule?
Yes, because the conference is October
Yes.
24th and 25th, and then March 20th and 21st.
So, say hypothetically, data comes back, survey comes back, whatever, and we're looking for a change in that. I don't know if it would be an additional conference, I don't know what it would be. But if we approve the calendar now, and then we want to change to that schedule, how does that work?
Yeah, the only thing that the calendar reflects is the conferences.
Okay.
And I think, and Peggy and I have spoken about this, the October was a resounding hit.
I agree.
So I don't think that's something we'd be looking to change.
Okay, and then report cards, if there was going to be more reporting or something, then that wouldn't necessarily affect a calendar
Nope.
anyways.
And I think the only other thing that doesn't align with Masco is the full day teacher PD day in January. They have a full day off on a Monday rather than a Friday.
Yep, that is correct. So they do, I think because it's midterms, they do two long weekend Mondays in a row. We've historically had our PD day on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, Martin Luther King weekend. Certainly a conversation we can be open to,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean,
It's 4-day weeks either way.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just, Masco has to put it on that day because then it gets midterms or mid-year
Okay.
or something like that.
Do you think there's any value in surveying parents on the calendar? Like, how is every other Friday? Every person I've spoken to since the start of the year has said, I hate it. It stinks. And so I say, well, they're trying it. They have to do this PD, like, but I mean,
think
I don't know what wiggle room there is, if any.
Yeah. I think what you would hear, what I found in my experience, Natasha, over the years, is that we need the PD time for sure. I think
Right.
that case was well documented last year, and it continues to be as we think about literacy and all the other things we have to do. Let's just say we moved it to a Tuesday. The other half of the people that like it on Friday then say, I can't believe it's on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those where some do like it, some don't like it, and then when you change it, the half that did like it don't like it, and you run into, it's like the room is too hot, the room is too cold, no matter where you put it on. Peggy, I don't know if you have a perspective or a thought on that, but that's been my experience over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the other most common day for districts that have, that's kind of early release for PD is on Wednesdays. And I think Scott makes a good point that feels disruptive, particularly at the elementary level, in terms of like keeping kids focused in the arc of learning over the week. The district I live in used to have Wednesdays. They switched it to Fridays during the pandemic because they have an early release every Friday. And so they used to have it on Wednesdays, and then in the pandemic they moved it to Fridays to have like extra cleaning time, and everybody loved moving it to Fridays because the teachers felt it was less disruptive, families liked that kind of like ended their week, and so I think it's a pick your poison kind of thing, but there are some good arguments to having it on Friday rather than Wednesday. I haven't really heard of a whole lot of districts doing it on other days besides that. We, for a while, were alternating Friday afternoons and delayed openings on Monday.
That was not.
And the delayed openings just don't work well. By the time the kids get in here, it's practically lunch. It's really disruptive to learning. I don't know, Jeff, I think you've had strong feelings about how the impact of that on your building. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, it was, you're right. I mean, kids were walking in the door, taking
Going to
attendance and
lunch.
going to lunch. So, and then and I think there was less, the time may have been the same between an early release for the PD, but it feels really cut short, right? And I think particularly that may just be mindset of, I got to go through this PD, but I'm also thinking about the rest of the day, where early release, the day's over, right? Particularly on a Friday, I'm not thinking about the next day and my plans and what I need to do in my classroom to get ready for that. I always feel like the early release is way more productive than the delayed opening. again, throw in the fact that it's a delayed opening, and then you're going, right, we still have lunch. So it's really not just the, 2.5 hours of the PD that the students lose, but then as soon as they come in, they go to lunch, and there's another 40 minutes, 45 minutes with transitions that they're also not getting content as well. At least with the early release days, that's content all morning, and we're not stopping for lunch and taking more time that way.
I mean, I remember going through this last year and thinking where we could knock off some of these early release days, and there was always a dollar amount assigned to it. Like if we wanted to have just one early release day per conference for the 2 conferences, okay, well, if we were asking teachers to hold conferences at night, there's going to be a dollar amount assigned to that, you know. Or if we wanted to have more full day PD, then we tack on another day of the school year, so another dollar amount assigned to it, you know. So
Yeah, we're trying to do everything within the confine of the school year.
right. Looking at the calendar now, the only early release day that is, well, there's 2 that are not related to conferences or professional development are the day before Christmas break and Thanksgiving break and the last day of school. Per the teacher's contract, we can't have PD on early release days before holiday.
Wait, sorry, say that again? Per
The Friday before
Christmas. Yeah.
Christmas break, and the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Those have always been early release days.
Okay.
But, I mean, think about
Yeah, that would not
your
be
mindset,
productive.
you know, how much learning is going to happen,
Right.
you know, and I mean, the last day of school.
I wonder about, again, maybe in just, I don't know, trying to work with families, if that one January PD day, if it is helpful to those families who have the younger kids and the Masco kids, and if we could align and move it to a Monday, because if it really doesn't impact us any other way, I don't know if we already have nailed down what our PD day, you know, what our PD is, and if we already have that scheduled, but if we could make that effort to line up that day, then I think it's worth looking at that. But otherwise, I think a lot of the families who have said they don't like the Friday days, they're not going to like it any better on any other day. They just don't like the early release has been what, you know, that it feels like a lot of early releases. So it doesn't matter what day we put it on. But if we could, in good faith, say, you know, we'll try and line up this day because it lines up better with Masco, then I think that's worth a shot.
Yep.
So you're saying that January one, move it to the 13th, the Monday?
I think so. My computer just died, but I think that.
Yes.
Is it the 13th or the
Yeah.
27th?
Yeah.
It's
It
the
would
13th.
be moving the 17th to the 13th.
So instead of a 4-day weekend, we'd have 2 3-day weekends.
Yep.
Back to back.
Yeah.
I would just ask if we make that move to align it up for families, that is an agreement across the tri-town.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because we
Right,
desperately
yes,
need
yes.
a common day.
Yes,
In order to
yes.
do the PD that we
Agreed.
have to do.
Yep.
So if it was the will of the committee to vote the calendar tonight, just for us to try to be efficient, I would say vote it 2 ways.
Yep.
And then that way, as we go through the other 2 towns, right, like vote it as presented, and then vote it with the understanding that we may try to move that
Okay.
PD day, and then when we go to, what do we have, Thursday, Topsfield, and then we go next week to Boxford. That way, we would have sort of both votes in hand.
Yep.
If the committee wanted to be willing to do that, that would allow us the flexibility to navigate it.
I would be fine voting in what Scott just stated, voting in both ways. I hear the concern of the early release days. I just don't think right now there's any way around it.
Do you think this will be, I went back and watched the May meeting from last year just so I could remember everything. And you had said at the time, like, this is for the foreseeable future, because once we get past literacy, we have other fish to fry. What, do you think we'll ever get back to 5 full days, or no?
I would look to Peggy. I would say probably not, when I think about all the content that we have to cover. There's just so many changes that we're trying to navigate, so many curricular programs that we're trying to navigate, and what's near impossible to do and has a dollar value added to it and is never productive. It's like we were saying when, you go away and then you have to feel like you have 2 weeks of work when you go away for one, it's 2 for 1. We've tried pulling teachers during the day and getting subs, right? A, you can't get subs. B, the teacher comes back to the classroom and it's, double work by the time you get back in because it wasn't the teacher in that classroom. And so we've tried that endeavor over the years, and that has not been a productive endeavor. Where that falls short, Natasha, too, is like if there's 6 people on a team, we can only get subs for 3, and now those 3 teachers are going, and the other 2 or 3 aren't, and how do we get them trained? It becomes a challenge for sure. I don't want to speak for Peggy, but I have a feeling that when I think of math and science and some of the other areas that we need to move on in the years ahead, we're certainly not looking to add any PD time for sure, but I think you're probably going to want to hold on to what you have, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just couldn't quite hear the question, but you were asking if we would ever see a reduction of
Yeah, like in the foreseeable future.
of not having early release days, is that what you're asking?
Or not
Yeah,
having
I don't see that.
none, but just reducing it.
Right, I don't think so. I think we're pretty much in line or maybe a little less than most other districts, and we have the same amount of work to do with our staff as those other districts have. We do have this major literacy initiative. It will take a couple of years of solid PD to make sure that the implementation is sort of with fidelity across the tri-town. And then we haven't actually, like math, for example, we needed to upgrade that during the pandemic. So that was originally adopted around 2012, 2013, and the Math and Focus program around 2020, which would have been the time when you'd kind of be looking to see, is this a program we want to stick with, or do we want to change horses at this point? Is this working for us? They stopped producing the version of the curriculum that we had, but it was like and so they upgraded. So we had to either upgrade or change to a new horse, and it was the middle of the pandemic, and no one had any bandwidth to be changing curriculum programs while we were trying to teach remotely, et cetera. So it's been long overdue for us to look at math. But there's only so much that we can fund at once, and there's only so much PD time that we have at once, and only so much bandwidth that teachers who teach multiple subjects have at once. So as soon as we're done with literacy, we're on to math. We haven't looked at science in quite some time. We're going to be doing some PD a little bit this spring and then in the fall, because the state is making a very major change to the MCAS and how that looks, really kind of changing much more to emphasizing really, it's a good direction of sort of assessing related to like hands-on learning in science. And so, but that is going to require PD and potentially some different resources than what we have. We also have not looked at science in a long time. So social studies, the state has started to write this investigating history curriculum that they have rolled out in 5 through 7. They're about to roll it out in 3 through 4. It really is an excellent curriculum. We have some teachers piloting it across the tri-town, but that's not something that we have rolled out systematically, so that's another area. So there's never any end to the work that one does around curriculum, because we have to constantly evaluate if it's working, what are we seeing in terms of student achievement, is this still the right curriculum for us? And so for sure, math is on the docket right after literacy, just because it's been so long since we've been able to do a thorough review of what we're using for our math tools. So I don't see that anytime in the near future having less of a need for professional development. It's difficult to get done what we need to get done in the amount of time that we have, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion to approve the school calendar as presented and as,
I would say that maybe a separate motion
yeah,
to approve it.
Yeah.
As presented, aligning the January PD day with Masco, and that way I just want to double check that with Mike.
Yeah.
And find out what the exact day is. I don't want to say
Okay.
the date.
Okay, so 2 separate motions. This one will be to make a motion to approve the school calendar for 2020, 2024, 2025 as presented.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, the second motion would be to approve the school calendar with changing the January 17th PD day to January 13th if Boxford and Topsfield also vote to do the same.
So my only question is, are we sure it's the 13th? That's the one thing I would just want to check with Mike.
Should the motion be just to align
That's
with
what I'm saying,
Basco?
change to
Oh,
align
yeah,
with the
to
Masco
align with
PD.
the Masco January full PD day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Thank you all very
Okay.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very good. So we will cycle that through the other two towns and see where that lands for sure. So thank you for that. FY '25 budget, wanted to revisit and come back to where we were at our Saturday budget meeting a few weeks back. Thank you all for your thoughtful questions along the way as we navigated that. There's a couple things, just some highlights. Steve will talk a little bit about health insurance and transportation. These are some of the things that we had flagged at the beginning. In the drive, what Steve will do, he'll take you through, and for those of you that have been on the committee a while, you remember this, the adjustment sheet. This is sort of how we keep track of, where we're moving with the budget, any potential savings or changes or things along those lines. I think just a couple of sort of preface kind of comments as we navigate through this. So Steve and I had an opportunity to regroup coming out of the Saturday budget meeting. As you may recall, we had some discussion around specialist time. I can tell you as I look across the three towns, specialist time has always been the tightest in Middleton in terms of, passing in the hallways and having a class start at 10:10 and one end at 10:10 kind of a thing. We've always tried to navigate that. We've had assistants taking sections here and there to try to cover some time. And so as Steve and I got a chance to sit down and take a deeper dive on it, and that's always, a little bit of a challenge when we're launching three budgets at the same time, so we got a chance to do that recently. When we look at it, Fulham Meadow needs about a 0.7 to accomplish what they need to accomplish within their class sections. And then Howe Manning needs around a 1.0. And we had talked about this at the last meeting, like we had to top off some specialists, so to speak, in order to navigate and get through the pieces that we want to navigate and get through as it relates to class sections. So if you have 6 sections at a kindergarten, let's say, you want those teachers to have specialists all at the same time, because that allows for that common planning to happen on the back end, and it allows the kids to have a specialist experience all at the same time as well. And that helps obviously with scheduling and with continued growth and development of our kids across all the different subject areas. So Steve will talk a little bit about this as we go through the sheet. But when we look at the specialist roles that we have at Fulham Meadow, they currently have right now that the FTE for art is a 0.5. To get that to a 0.7, we would need a 0.2 art. Innovation is a 0.5. To get that to a 0.7, we would need a 0.2 innovation. Music is a 0.6. To get that to a 0.7, we would need a 0.1. So these are sort of bits and pieces. PE is currently already a 0.7. Library is a 0.5. To get that to a 0.7, we would need a 0.2. And then the question had come up about the SEL teacher as well, and the conversation we had around that. That's on Steve and I. We just missed that as we were preparing the budget, to be perfectly frank. It was in the narrative. Jen had it in the narrative, and it just never made it into the budget as we had that conversation. So that's just us launching, and that was just a miss on that Saturday for sure. And so the SEL teacher would be helpful to have as that 6th specialist, so to speak, because we have 6 class sections. And then one other piece that came up after the budget was a special ed teacher, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, but this was post-budget book being developed. We have internal special education programming that we have in place, and we've had to make some updates to that program, and that would necessitate an additional special ed teacher in that program. So those are 2 things Steve will talk a little bit about. And then if we look over at Howe Manning, there's innovations would stay at 1.0, music already is a 1.0, PE is a 0.7, we would need to add 0.3 to that to get it to 1.0. Library is a 0.5, we want to add 0.5 to that to get it to a 1.0. Jeff had talked about a coding section as well, and there would be some FTE associated with that. So I think the idea of 0.7 and 1.0 as specialists at the 2 schools, and then talking a little bit more, and you'll see this on the sheet here, in terms of the SEL teacher and in terms of the special ed teacher. When Steve walks you through this, we factor in retirements, we factor in hiring, and you'll see sort of all of the back and forth and the numbers, and we can take questions along the way for sure. And at the end of the day, the way this is presented right now, and obviously this is still, we are in budget discussion mode, but right now, as of today, looking at what Steve has put together, the override would be about $357,975 would be the override amount, based upon all that I just talked about and some of the other adjustments that Steve is going to talk about. So I just wanted to set it up with this idea of the .7s at Fuller Meadow, 1.0s at Howe Manning, allowing us the opportunity to enrich our programming for sure. And with that, if it's okay with the chair, I'll turn it over to Mr. Greenberg to walk us through all of the discussion points.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please.
That starting point was dead on. So before we get going into the numbers and the detail, do you have any questions about the concept?
Wasn't the increase over 5 before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
5
so
was-
this is, when we get into this budget itself is a bit unique, that we are looking at an override, and that we've talked about program enhancements and enrichment, right? And so, as we've gone through and really started scrubbing numbers and looking at the detail, looking at changes in staff, and where we could pick up dollars, it has come down. So yes, it started at 5. You're gonna see some things that you'll vote on to reduce the budget that, hey, we didn't have that information at the time, but we do now. You know, so like looking at a bus, looking at insurance, looking at some savings on software. You know, so that's over 120, about 120,000 right there. You know, so just, you know, when you ask that question, this is what the process is. And, you know, we start here, and when we start and we give you that information, we don't have it all at that point. We don't know that when we budget a premium increase of 10%, we don't know at that point in time it's going to come down to 6.5. You know, so it's lots of moving parts, and then retirements start to happen and other things as well.
And David, I would say in the other things category as well, Michelle and Steve and I have been making the Saturday morning circuit to FinCom and Select Board, and, you know, we've continued to enjoy a great connection and partnership with all of our town boards, and, you know, the feedback there of, can we continue to work on that number?
Yep.
In terms of the override, and again, they've been tremendous partners over the years, and we're in to see them on Thursday of this week as well. So that's some of the feedback we've been getting on some of those Saturday morning meetings also.
One other thing I wanted to mention, because it was, when I was looking at this adjustment sheet, it was kind of confusing. So this adjustment sheet is, we would be voting on things that are different than what is in our proposed budget book that we got on that Saturday. Okay, so anything that is already in there or missing is what is on, anything that's already in there that's different or missing is on the adjustment sheet.
We'll walk you through it.
Okay,
Right, we'll walk you through it.
I'm probably just.
It's not, I would say to you, you know, we had a proposed budget, that budget's on track, okay? What is also on the adjustment sheet in front of you will be consideration for an SEL teacher and a special ed teacher. All right? But if you don't mind, just for the sake of time, if we could go through each line, I'm gonna ask if there are any questions. We'll give an overview of it. I'll ask if there are any questions, and then I'll ask that you voted. It's just because time's gonna go quick.
Okay.
All right? So the first one, these first three are very, very straightforward, they're wins for us. So the first one is to reduce our bus fleet from 8 budgeted buses to 7. We would be partnering with Masconomet on that. And so we would save $44,033. And currently, we're running 6 buses. And so this would bring our budgeted fleet from 8 to 7. So I'll answer any questions the committee may have.
Were we possibly talking about getting down to 6? I feel like the number was 80 that we were
You're
talking
absolutely
about.
correct, but with Masconomet at this point in time, they're discussing, I don't want to
Okay.
say they voted, but they're discussing just 3.
Okay.
So that we 1 Middleton, 2 Boxford at this point in time.
Okay.
And we always have to be lockstep with them, Jack.
Yes.
So they have to be
Yes.
lockstep with us.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, however you look at it.
And for the newer members, just so you understand why, if we let's say we only cut 2 and they cut 3, that means that the cost of a shared bus wouldn't be shared anymore, and it would fall upon one of the districts to absorb the whole cost. So for us, that $44,000 bus could become a $100,000 bus. Okay? All right. Questions on this one? Ask for a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to reduce the buses from 8 to 7?
I'll make that.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay.
Thank you. Next one, savings on insurance. Our original budget, I believe we carried 12% on the premium. It's coming down, the premium increase is 6.5, but we're also keeping 2% in there because of the shift in the split. All right, so the premium itself increases by 6.5, but because the town is changing its shared cost with an employee, FY '23, it was 60/40, FY '24, it's 62/38, and now I believe they want to go to 64/36. So that's also factored into the budget. So with all that being said, we would be saving $66,385, and I will answer any questions the committee may have. Seeing none, Madam Chair, I'd ask for a motion on that.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the savings on the insurance portion of the budget.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Thank you.
Okay.
Next one, Sonic Wall renewals. This is a duplication, and that we have Sonic Wall, which is, that's the software that protects, and the hardware, it's a licensing that protects us from, let's say, bad behaviors and getting into our systems. And that's carried in the central office budget, and it was in the tech maintenance budgets for Howe, Manning, and Fuller. That's $5,000 apiece, a total of $10,000. I would ask that we reduce the budget by $10,000, and I'll answer any questions the committee may have.
So it was in both places. In
Yes.
the book, it was in both places,
Yes.
and then you realized that. So we're taking it out of Howe, Manning, Fuller Meadow, just leaving it there.
Leaving it in central office, because that's where it belongs.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to remove the Sonic Wall renewals.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay.
All right, thank you. Next ones. This is where we're going to add some money back into the budget. First one is to approve an increase in the budget of $57,517 for a 1.0 FTE SEL teacher at Fuller Meadow. And we will answer any questions that the committee may have about that.
This goes back to the conversation at the top as it relates to when we look at class sections right now. Kids are often doubling up in specialists at Fuller Meadow to get to the 6, like we always try to get to 6 specialists if we have 6 class sections. And so this was in the narrative at Fuller Meadow to have an SEL teacher. Jen talked about it briefly at the Saturday budget meeting. We're happy to talk more about it here for sure. I can tell you that, certainly we look at SEL, it's what's on our report card, basically. I mean, Michelle, I know you got a copy of the report card there.
Yeah.
Our 4 areas of SEL that we've had as part of our work forever is self-management, social awareness, growth mindset, and self-efficacy. That has always been our focus as it relates to social emotional learning. This goes back to, 16, 17, 18, that we had identified as a tri-town, these 4 areas. We want our kids, when we think about self-management, basically the way we say that to our kids is the ability to control emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations, right? Self-efficacy is the belief in myself that I can succeed and achieve a goal. Growth mindset, I believe I can grow as a student. And social awareness and ability to be kind to others regardless of all of our differences. And so those are always been our 4 areas around social emotional learning. They're connected to what are called the CASEL competencies, which are competencies as they relate to social emotional learning, but these have always been our focus areas. And Jen, I know you've spoken about what you're seeing in terms of some dysregulation and how you'd like this to be a training ground. So we're happy to take any questions in terms of how do we build on these skills through this addition of an SEL teacher.
During the budget meeting, I had asked Jen if DESE recognizes SEL.
I did look that up.
Yeah.
Because I remembered your question. So there isn't an actual certification, but there are like master's programs. I don't think it's so far off at this point that they're probably going to be looking at a certification program. I was curious about that myself after you asked that question. So none that I can see, but schools that are offering master's program in this specific thing. And actually, in some school districts, you're finding out that they're starting to hire like SEL coordinators, almost like people that sort of oversee this distribution and how it works within a district. So I don't think it's too far off, to be honest with you.
So the SEL person, the kids would split gym, is that right? Like every other gym they would miss? Why would
In the
Yeah.
6-day rotation,
Yeah.
it would be art, music, PE, innovations,
Library.
SEL.
Yep.
SEL, okay.
So there's 6 sections,
Yeah.
but there's only 5 specialists.
Right.
So I think Jim has 2.
Two classes
Classes
combined
right,
in order,
combined.
and it's, you know, we're working it, but it's a little
Yeah.
tricky.
What would happen, and can you give me an example of like what a class, I mean, I know what gym looks like, obviously, like what would SEL look like?
Well, so I jotted down a few notes, you know, in case folks had questions. One, I mean, it's too bad Matt's not here tonight, but we'll be looking at the curriculum that social curriculum committee adopts. So for example, if it was something like Second Steps, we would be using that curriculum, but it really just depends on where they land. So they would be preparing and delivering lessons to all students across the building in K1 and 2 that fall into these competencies. So depending on the curriculum that we end up with, that's what they'd be focusing on. So the benefit is that pretty much every student in the school is going to be getting that in a 6-day rotation every 6 days for 45 minutes. They could potentially do small group instruction for a second tier. They could sort of help us pull together the resources that we're using, acting as an instructional leader. They could push into the classroom and support classroom teachers if they're finding some areas of maybe challenge within those competencies, sort of classroom-wide, where they could co-teach and partner with the teacher. And so I see it sort of as a special. When you go into a special, you watch a teacher sort of deliver what the objective is of that lesson, and then they find different ways to have the students engage in that work, whether it's some small groups that they work with, they're checking in, partner work, pairing work, coming back at the end, talking about what they learned. There could be all kinds of engaging ways they could do that, so.
But like what, I guess, I don't know how to explain what I'm asking. Would you give a scenario, like at the beginning of the class, like, Billy pushed Johnny over, this is how it makes Johnny feel, you know, like how?
Right. So I don't know that that would be an objective
Okay.
of a lesson, but it could be a piece of a lesson that helps you get to that objective.
Okay.
So if you think of a math lesson and here's your overarching objective of what you're trying to do, the different ways the teachers go about achieving that objective, it could vary. So one could be possible scenarios, some could be some role playing, talking about strategies. There's so many different ways they could come at this.
Okay.
And it could be a really interactive kind of lesson, you know, it's not just sit and teacher deliver. I would see the objective being something you kind of push out there, have a discussion about as a whole group, and now you're going to start doing some strategy work, just like they do in math, reading, any other subject. So very similarly.
We had a teacher who, she was our school counselor, this is in Boxford, Natasha, and then Triton had developed a similar role to this, north of us on 95. And we didn't have her, she wanted to stay in the district, right? And this role was being created somewhere else where they were doing this sort of in-class teaching around, you know, these competencies. I don't know if their competencies were different than ours. I mean, ours have always been these 4, and these will continue to be the 4 that we focus on. But I think one of the things that strikes me about this is that Middleton has always sort of taken the lead in piloting some things over the years in terms of that. And then we talked to the other 2 towns and, hey, we've got this off the ground and we're trying it and it seems to be successful and so on and so forth. So this is a nice opportunity for us to do this as well, particularly where we're seeing, you know, you hear Matt talk about the dysregulation of some of our kiddos and how we need to, you know, connect with them at a younger age on self-management, right, and growth mindset and having a belief that I can achieve a goal and some of these other pieces. So I think that's really a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
In terms of hiring this teacher, what sort of bullet points do you look for in a resume? Because it's not like you're hiring a music teacher or an art teacher, you know.
So, I mean, I think I would work with a group of teachers from here and kind of define that, including the counselors. I personally have ideas, but I'd like to expand on that because it is new. But, you know, first and foremost, I want to find someone who could teach, right? Because if you have someone that really knows this stuff, but they're not able to sort of effectively deliver a lesson and have their own management, that could be tricky. So, you know, my hope would be if we get this, it'd be nice to see maybe someone come in and do a model lesson as part of the interview process. So, you know, making sure that they really know how to differentiate instruction, how do they know how to engage students, and also have the content knowledge so they understand this. But, depending on the curriculum that gets chosen, there are also so many resources out there right now that are exciting ways that you could enhance this type of instruction. So I think it's a new opportunity, so I'd want to sit with a group of people and really think about how to frame that.
Okay. And when would we sort of get the presentation on the curriculum?
Yeah, I've asked Matt that today, where they are in their process. He's not in today.
Okay.
So I did swing him a note I'll connect with him first thing tomorrow morning and ask when that will be. So I'll have a better sense of that tomorrow.
Okay.
I just wanted to add too, I think I saw, I don't know, it was on Instagram, like a meme or something, but it was basically saying like, we are asking our classroom teachers to be everything, to be social workers, to be parents, to be, math teachers, reading teachers, the nurse, and to be so many things. So if we had an SEL teacher, then that would, because right now what we're also asking is we have these teacher developed lessons and we're asking our classroom teachers to run these SEL lessons on top of everything they're already doing. This is a perfect opportunity to take that one piece, like the sole responsibility of that one piece off, and put it in specialists, just like art, just like, music, but still coordinate with the classroom teachers for those kids who need that carryover.
Right.
I see it in conjunction with the school counselors, the social workers. Ideally, I would think maybe you hire somebody who has like a social work background or the counselor background and also has their teaching certification. I, in my mind, just because it's what I do and I understand, I can perfectly envision how a class would run and also how it could benefit, but I love the idea of it's taking something formally off our teacher's plate and putting it in a place where it can be better executed with the curriculum and with fidelity and then help to support the teachers in a
Well,
way.
the other thing is, I think then you're looking at every child in the
Yes.
building getting the same type of thing versus, right now teachers are working hard to kind of fit this in. And, you've got 20 minutes in your calendar and your schedule and you're trying to do that along with all those other things. And, we all know something gives sometimes. And so this way we would be assured that every child is getting that kind of instruction. And our hope would be by the time they leave here at the end of second grade, they've really developed a foundation. And for kids who haven't, then we know they need something more, right? And then we have to, figure out what that looks like.
Jackie, quick soapbox, and I'll be real quick because I know we're on limited time, but I hope one day we have the conversation in all three towns and in broader public education. The container hasn't changed, right? And what I say by the container is the 186.5, right? That container hasn't changed. Everything else has changed, right? And we talk about PD and trying to find time and trying to squeeze everything into this 183 and the 6.5 hours. I think we need to get to a point where public school evolves that the school year is 195 and we're paying people for a 195-day schedule. And there's money associated with all of that, right? But when we think of we are always, and we public education, not we Middleton, we are always trying to shoehorn, let's shoehorn the PD and let's shoehorn this and let's shoehorn that in. And when I think of a longer year or a longer day, and it would be a very deep conversation, because when you think about it, the whole world revolves around the school schedule. Summer camps, dental appointments, it's like the school schedule first and then everything sort of gets built around it. That to me has to be a conversation at some point in public education, whether that be in Middleton, Boxford, Topsfield, Rowley, whatever, but this idea of there's so much to do and the container hasn't changed in 100 years. It's the same container. And so to me, that has to be part of this conversation.
Scott, have you shared Volmer's list with the committee?
Yeah, I haven't. I should. Yeah. There was a list I had shared with the administrative team of what was added in the 60s, what was added in the 70s, what was added in the 80s, what was added in the 90s, what was added in the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s. And again, that whole thing,
Still fits in the
and we're
same.
still in this, we're still in this bottle, right? So, anyway, now I'm off my soapbox.
Other questions?
So since this is a pilot program, but we don't know the curriculum yet, could we get the curriculum and have more of a discussion on it?
So there's a social SEL curriculum committee, Joe, that's working.
Okay.
And they are working on, so what we've done for years is exactly what Jackie had said. That team put together teacher-created lessons and teacher materials to try to do this work in the classroom. And, right now, that would be the plan, with a curriculum not in place at the moment. The plan would be to take all of those lessons that the teachers have been trying to do and scoop them up and give them to the SEL teacher to teach during that block, so to speak. I need to find out where they are with that SEL curriculum in terms of are they close to picking one? Do they have a funding mechanism for it, right? Because they might have one picked, but if there's no funding mechanism for it, then, how does that get paid for, kind of a thing. So that team is, I know, working on that now. I'll have more information on that at a later date. We will have to kind of navigate this as, we go to our public hearing by April in terms of the public hearing on the budget. And as I said, all three committees, March is sometimes a season where we have a couple extra meetings because we need to, have more discussions on the budget or things that we don't get to during again, shoehorning everything into the time frame that we have. So that's the best answer I can give you as of tonight, is that I know there's a committee still working.
A little more to that, just because I've talked with Matt.
That'd be great, Jackie.
So I know that they've at least narrowed it down to 2.
Okay.
And there are programs, whether they're in Middleton or not, and maybe one class is in Middleton, that they are actually piloting lessons within each of the curriculums that they've narrowed it down to be able to focus and to come up with the one final one. So I know that they're getting close to making the final decision, but I believe they had narrowed it down to maybe it was 2 or 3. One is one that Middleton is already familiar with, and I can't remember the name of the other 2, but they are narrowing it down, and it is actually being piloted in some extent, I think, in each of the districts.
And Joe, they would focus on these very things that Scott or I talked about, these competencies, which are.
If I can add to that a little bit, I don't know the final schedule on that. I know they were supposed to make a decision on March 13th because Matt and I have been toggling our various committees and their meeting dates, but they got snowed out of one of their presentations, so he does need to reschedule that, but I do think it's pretty imminent that they'd be making a decision. But I do want to comment, if you notice on the report card, so we have these 4 categories of the SEL, and we've articulated some of the things that we want to see from students. So we've articulated some of our objectives, the competencies that we want students to have within these 4 categories of SEL, and that could be a very good guide for if this other curriculum isn't on board right away, or perhaps that curriculum doesn't take all the time that they have, there are specific outcomes that we are hoping that students will achieve that can be part of that curriculum development within that role.
And I think what would happen, 2 things. If this wasn't something that, the committee supported this year, they would go back to double PE, and we'd be looking to increase the FTE in PE because we're, doubling up classes. I would assume, Jen, has not been a productive endeavor as had been originally. You inherited that, I think.
Yeah, they would be doubled up even if we
Regardless.
increased PE
Yeah.
time, the FTA, because it's
Cost,
the
what's the
6-section
cost?
thing that causes us.
No, 50, so I'm saying, what's the cost of the other, if we keep the double P?
You have it already in the budget? If you say double, the way that you're making the PE a 1.0?
Yeah.
That's been already built in.
Yeah,
So it's I think that's 19
Yeah.
that's built in.
yeah.
Could we table this vote and hope that by our next meeting, Matt will be here and we can get.
Well, the next meeting is,
Unless you add one.
unless we add one, would be the April 1st hearing, where we need to have the budget finalized for the public hearing. So we would need to add something in between now and then.
You want to put a pin in it for now, just to kind of continue, just in the sake of time, just look at some of the other items?
We can look at some of the other items. I think, this wasn't on the original budget. Obviously, it was placed on tonight. It's a $57,000 position. I think a little bit more information on, what the curriculum is and how it's going to be taught, that would be helpful for me. I'm not saying it's not necessary or that I'm against it. I just think that
Sure.
a little bit more knowledge surrounding making that decision.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see the value in it for sure. I see where my kids would have benefited from it.
I mean, it makes sense from a schedule
Yeah.
standpoint, having 6 specialists
and,
to coincide. And
but I see where everyone seems to want a little bit more information. So unless anyone wants to make a motion on it tonight, we could table it and schedule some sort of meeting between now and April 1st, where do you think you'll have more information before then?
Well, it sounds like Peggy, in her conversation with Matt, looks like they're looking at a March 13th date.
Yeah, it might have to get pushed back if they weren't able to reschedule that other presentation. So they were supposed to decide on the 13th following 2 presentations. One got snowed out. So I know he was trying to get that one rescheduled. So, but his plan was to have it for approved like next week. It may be pushed back a little bit while he reschedules that publisher.
Okay, so it would be the middle of this month.
So again, should we just pin that for now to go through some of these others, just to kind of get them
This
talked
is
about?
maybe a weird request, but Peggy, I think you just said, or maybe it was Jackie, that one of the schools in the district is trialing the curriculum. Is there any way that one of us could go and like observe?
You could, or if it's a matter of like, you're just curious, you can't
Yeah,
even
I
imagine
just-
like what it would look like. I know one of the ones that they were looking at was Second Step, but even if you just look up Second Step, it'll give
Okay.
you idea of, they were all a little bit different and they like certain features about each of them, but that's one that has been run in the past. I think, like when, maybe even this far back, like when Warren was here, I think they were doing Second Step, but the way that it looked then is like Dr. Carrero was running like, what did she call them? They were like full school programs, or it was like Open Circle was another one. But they were doing like full school time or grade-wise time in the cafeteria with Dr. Carrero, talking about these same things. Now it would be placed in a special. So these curriculums and programs have been run in the school, but Second Step is one that I know was on the table. The other ones would be similar. But if you want to get a sense of like, what do they, like,
Yeah,
what
I'd
does the
love to-
scope and sequence look like, that would be one to look at.
To me, it
Thank
makes
you.
sense to take it out of the hands of the teachers who are teaching it on an individual level, standardizing it, have it coincide. I mean, all that makes sense to me. I just, like you said, conceptually, I just don't
Yeah.
know what's going to be taught in the class and how it's approached, and that's my only interest.
You want to go to the sped teacher?
Yes,
Have that conversation?
please. Yes, and I think the sped teacher, in the narrative, it was a different dollar amount.
Like
Is that
88
correct?
or 85?
Where is it?
It was 88, I think.
85.
I think it was 85, yeah. Yeah, so it would be, yeah.
Steve, you want to continue on?
Absolutely. So with the special education teacher, the original ask was probably put in at an M15 step 7. This would be an M1. That's why there's a difference in dollars. So I will stop there. If the committee has any questions for Dr. Roberts on this position.
And if the committee, again, this is where it comes down to, we're trying to be conscious of all of the impacts on the budget and working closely with our town boards and committees. Committee could say to us, nope, hire an M7. Okay, and if we do that, the override would now go to 377 as opposed to 357. So know that as a committee, you have that, it's the will of the committee, as we like to say, but we're trying to balance all of the factors associated with the impacts on the budget and hearing feedback from our town boards and partners. And so hiring at an M1 obviously reduces that exposure in terms of cost. But if the committee was hopeful that that was a hire at a higher rate, that would just increase the override amount. Does that make sense?
I do have questions. So is that teacher to split out the essentially ECLC program that you have right now, which
Right.
is the highest level need students in the school
You
with
wanna be
significant
careful.
behavior?
You want
Sorry.
to be careful what you say.
Okay, okay. So I guess I'm curious, if you get an M1 teacher, a level 1 teacher, and that's the students that we're looking to educate, I personally might be in favor of a teacher with more experience for, I guess that's, for that population.
I'm speaking out of turn, stop me, but the M1 could theoretically have 5 years
Okay,
teaching
okay.
experience, right? They could come out with their bachelor's degree, have to get their master's degree while they're within that 5-year period. I think that's still the case, right?
They do,
Within
with maybe
that
as
5-year
experience, it would
period.
be,
I guess I would just want an experienced teacher for that population.
That's master's plus.
step one.
Master's step 1.
Yes.
Oh, so
Step one. So it would be, what your example would be a master's 5.
5. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
not actually.
Just be careful.
Yep.
How many students would this person be working with? Like, just ballpark?
Yep.
Currently, I could say that it would be 6, with
Okay.
It's just one of those things that
all
gets me killing you.
very specific
Yeah, we smoke.
needs and one-on-one with them.
Okay, thanks.
Again,
So
we try
each-
to build programming internally always.
Right,
Keep
okay.
kids in their home schools.
Least restrictive, I believe that's the term I learned is least restrictive.
So each of these students have literally individual plans for their entire day. So it's not like you're planning for your 6 students sort of as a group, you're planning for each student individually.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So then
ma'am?
would this teacher be with all 6 of those students all day, or no?
No, because some of them will push into the classroom for a period of time with the TA, but then pull back out. So they oversee the students' programming, the TAs that are assigned one-on-one, and they do direct instruction, but it's like a constant moving ebb and flow. Sometimes you'll go in and there will be all 6 at the same time, but there's a lot of movement in and out. It requires a lot of coordination. It's tricky, because if you think of how each child's IEP is written so individually and how their schedule looks.
So currently, do we have someone like this here?
Currently, we have what I would say a long-term sub to the end of the year, because this came about rather quickly.
Okay.
So what happened was, it happened after the budget was already
Yeah.
moved forward. I'd met with Steve, this happened, and then all of a sudden I said to him, I shot him an email, Matt, oh gosh, you need to get that in the budget for next year, because it came about after you all voted to help get us through. And then the realization came to me that I didn't have it in my budget request. So in other words, if we didn't talk about this come next year, I
Yeah.
pretty much wouldn't have a teacher in that room. So that's how it sort of reared its head.
Okay.
And this is enough to satisfy that? That position's enough to satisfy the amount of kids you anticipate that
The
are gonna have
1.0, the FTE, yes. Unless something changes like it did this past year, but as of today, I can tell you it would if.
It'd have to be a pretty big change.
Yeah.
Because you took, the one class was growing and growing and growing, and,
Yes,
and
we
this
split it.
allows you to split
Yes,
with a teacher for each
yes.
small group.
So even though it says like M1, they could be like, have their bachelor's and be like a B7, or would that not?
Yeah,
Be enough,
you'd look
or-
for somebody with their masters
You want some,
for this
okay.
particular role, for sure. Just a higher degree of training.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to accept it.
Second that motion?
Any further discussion?
So we're going with the 57, we're not going with the 85, the original?
Correct.
The 57, okay. Sorry, I'm hearing Jackie's.
I know, that's where I'm kind of hearing too.
My wheels are spinning on
Go
that
ahead.
one.
Stay where you are for right now.
Okay.
Stay where you are, okay? This budget, we're building a plan now for what we think is gonna happen in September. There's a lot of moving parts in this budget, so just stay where you
And
are.
why I would say I agree with Steve is
Yeah.
because, things could happen. You have someone else, you have a surprise retirement, and now all of a sudden there's, oh, we didn't realize there's 15, okay, now maybe on that special ed, we can look at like an M3, right? And so I think that's what Steve's getting at, is that you were building a budget for something that's gonna happen in September, and some things could shake loose, potentially, but if they don't, we'd be sitting at an M1, but you might have some flexibility that comes about. So I agree with Steve's assessment on that. So you got a motion made and seconded.
Okay. All in favor of approving the special ed teacher as a 1.0 FTE, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay.
The next one, Scott, do we wanna,
That's just looking at
yeah, you know,
reinvest existing funds to support
Yeah.
SEL and SPED, right, where it's connected to the SEL. Maybe we sit on that one for
yeah,
now.
we'll just, all right, so let's move, if you don't mind, we can move on to the next one. And even that one too?
Yep, I'd sit on that one for now,
Okay.
because that's connected if SEL doesn't happen. Yep.
All right. The next one would be for savings with the Fuller Meadow Library, which would be, it makes it a .7 FTE, but that would change, so we would say 15,680. I'd ask the committee to make a motion to support that, and I'll answer any questions that you may have. Oh, sorry, Jackie.
So what was it in the budget?
I'm sorry?
What was it in the budget?
Like, almost 56,000.
Okay. So we're changing it to a
M1.
M1.
M1. Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry, refreshment, is that a retirement that we're,
It's just, we're looking at things moving around.
So this is topping up. Remember we talked about 0.7, 1.0?
yeah,
So currently we have 0.5
okay,
or 0.4 and 0.6, I forget the exact split
Yeah.
for library. And so in order to get that point, we're calling it a 0.5 because there's a 1.0 person currently, we would need to add,
No, reduce.
excuse me, reduce, thank you, Steve, because the money that Steve had allotted for that was at a higher
Higher.
rate,
okay,
and so we're going to hire at a lower rate.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion for the Fuller Meadow Library, moving it to a M1, hiring it an M1 at a point,
Just take the
Savings
reduction.
15.6.
or savings of $15,680.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays?
Thank you.
Okay.
Next one, we start to get into Howe Manning, and this is where we will make adjustments with FTEs to fulfill what's being proposed for enrichment and special subjects. And with this, it would be increasing the dollars for art, so that it is a 1.0 FTE for art at $36,178, and we'll answer any questions the committee may have. Seeing none, Madam Chair, I'd ask for a motion.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion for adding in $36,178 to make art an FTE 1.0?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Thank you. Next one is innovations for Howe Manning. This will make that a 1.0. It is a 1.0 position, but with shifting in staff, it requires an increase of $38,626. I'll stop and answer any questions the committee may have about that.
Wait, so we're going from a 1.0 to a 1.0?
It is, but you have a shift in staff. And where the 1.0 is budgeted at a much lower rate, what's probably going to happen with the person that will go into that
You
position,
may have internal shifting around.
yes, that it'll be much, much more expensive. So you want to put the dollars in the right place in the budget. So as we continue to go through this list, you're taking it from this pocket, putting it in this pocket. That's what you're doing. But we have to go through this exercise so that we have everything lined up, and we've got the pluses and the minuses, and you see where you are, and we get to that override amount where we are right now.
And what Steve's accounting for, Natasha, is thinking that there may be internal people that move around, and so he's trying to account for internal people moving around. When you have openings such as this, when you have a 1.0 or a 0.5 or a 0.7, you may have that type of movement. So he's accounting for that in all of it, all the different lines that he has here.
There's that much of a difference in salary?
Yes?
And there is, but it's not, I think the better way to say it, Michelle, would be that when you hear of retirements, you might say, well, budget this at an M1, right? And so or an M7, let's say. Let's go with M7. So Steve, when he did the budget on that Saturday budget book, he might have looked at that role and said, oh, we may have retirement, and we'll budget something at an M7. And then you start to think about what's the differential between an M7 and someone who's an M14, and that's what that difference would be more representative of. Not so much that there's that much a difference in salary between two people. It's what Steve had budgeted versus what the actual might be.
Okay.
That said better.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, at Howe Manning, we have PE next year, we'll have
Yep.
PE,
Yep,
innovation,
yep,
library,
yep.
what am I
Music.
missing?
Art.
Music, art, coding.
Art,
So 6 specialists.
Yep.
okay. So we're swapping out artivation, or coding for artivation?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay. So I think the confusing part is, in the budget, you had budgeted for what?
M7.
For an M7. The person moving into the Artivation program is
Potentially.
potentially is
more.
not an M7.
Right.
And that's the difference. That's the difference in the salary.
Correct. Well said.
Yeah.
Other questions? Seeing none, Madam Chair, I'd ask for a motion.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve 38,600 and as the difference for the Artivation specialist?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
No pressure.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
All right.
Moving on, implementation of a coding section. We will be decreasing the budget by $17,353. I will stop and answer any questions the committee may have about that recommendation. Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion. Please and thank yous.
Okay, so. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion on the savings of $17,353 for implementation of the coding section?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Moving on, savings in an additional section that's being proposed, reduction of $14,838.
This section was in the budget on that Saturday. Steve's just dropping it from an M7 to an M1.
Yep.
Okay. All right, all in favor of approving the additional section as its savings of $14,838? Say, would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll
This is
make,
for the third grade next year?
It would be,
Yes.
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 I'll make that motion.
I'll second that. Oh.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
All right, thank you. Next one, savings of $52,976 on what will be an anticipated replacement, and that would be hiring at an M1.
Okay.
Any questions?
What did you previously have this budgeted as?
Higher.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion on savings on a new hire? And the savings would be $52,976.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Then saving money fund. All right, last one.
Okay.
All right, savings on new hire, Hal Manning. That would be $19,405, and would be associated with physical education going to 1.0.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Make that
I'm
motion.
just putting these pieces together.
Okay.
I can talk
Would
to
anyone like to second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of savings on a new hire for physical education, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Excellent. Thank you all very, very much. I will update this.
So, just what we have left is the SEL teacher.
Yes.
SEL.
And then the reinvesting of funds.
Yes, right, so let me just take those out so you can see where you are right now. So we didn't do the SEL teacher, we did not do the reinvestment of funds, and we did not do the PE, right? So if I take all of those out, we are currently at, above the guideline, $393,734.
So I think what we should do, it would be to schedule, I have a conversation with Matt, find out their time and schedule another meeting for mid-March, come back, touch upon these budget things, try to get to the policies that we didn't get to tonight. Steve and I do have to exit, we're over to Topsfield. There's one other item, I didn't know, on number 7 there, if there was an update on that, we wanted to share it all, zoning, planning.
Oh, yeah. There's a meeting tomorrow night. I believe it is joint planning select board. Last I heard, there is still a public hearing on March 12th, which is next Tuesday, in the cafeteria here. Last I heard, they're moving forward with the 3 zoning changes, so.
Came up in Topsfield, I was in Topsfield meeting
Okay.
today, and same dialogue, and I said, just not an easy cop, I just wanted
Yeah.
to say the same thing I said in Middleton and Topsfield as well.
I would encourage people, anybody who's watching who hasn't watched the open forum, I think it was January 30th. It's on the planning board website on the town page. It's really interesting. There's a lot of information. I just don't think people are aware. It would be a huge change for the town and obviously for the schools.
And we thank the PTO, Jeff and I had a conversation with Jackie.
Yeah.
They backed it up and said people can come and go and all
Yeah.
that as well, so
Yeah,
that's all been.
that's helpful, yeah.
So
Thank
thank you
you.
to Jackie for doing that.
Thank you.
So does it make sense for the committee if I connect with Michelle, put a meeting on the books for mid-March, come back on some of those topics that we didn't get a chance to nail down tonight, budget-wise and policy-wise? Does that make sense for everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay, with more information. We appreciate your work tonight for sure, so thank you
Thank you.
very, very much.
Very good, yep.
Yeah. Okay, we just need to accept the bills and payroll as presented. I will make that motion. Would
I'll
anyone
second
like
it.
to second it? Okay, all in favor to accept the bills and payroll as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All in favor to adjourn the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
And on
Thank you.